All right, for more on this, we're now being joined by Colonel David Bederosh from Washington, D.C. He's West Asia analyst and an associate professor at Near East South Asia Center for Security Studies. Thank you so much for joining us on World DNA this morning, sir. Of course, you know that the United States has leveled charges on 6 top Hamas leaders. That being said, how do you assess the implications of these charges that have been leveled? Do you think this is going to have any sort of a bearing in what's happening on ground? Because we've seen that there is growing anger and pressure. Even though the pressure has been mounting on Israeli Prime Minister for quite some time now, he remains defiant. How do you assess this? All right, I believe there is some technical issue that we're facing right now. We will get Colonel David Bederosh back online with us. Just to let our viewers know that massive protests are continuing for a third consecutive night in Israel's Tel Aviv, with demonstrators clashing with the police, demanding that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu secure a deal for the release of all the remaining hostages. And this anger and outrage, wave of anger and outrage, comes following the recovery of 6 dead hostages from Gaza.
Apart from that, the Philadelphia corridor, which has in the past few weeks been a point of contention between Israel and Hamas militants for a ceasefire deal. And now in the latest, the White House has announced that Israel has agreed to withdraw from parts of Philadelphia corridor. And the withdrawal of troops was to take place in the second phase of the hostage deal. And Mossad chief David Barnea said that Israel is now willing to exit the Philadelphia corridor. Of course, the question remains, how will this impact the ongoing ceasefire hostage talks? Because in the past, we've seen that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been adamant on the deployment of the Israeli troops at the Philadelphia corridor.
The United States, of course, has called for urgency and flexibility to finalize the agreement between Israel and Hamas for a truce deal. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said that the United States will work over the coming days with mediators Egypt and Qatar to push for a final agreement. All right. We now have Colonel David Bederosh back online with us. Sir, I hope you can hear me now.
I hear you perfectly. I'm sorry for the problem.
Oh, absolutely, sir. Sir, would you like me to repeat my question?
Please.
Sir, I was asking you about the implications of the charges that have been leveled by the United States on the top Hamas leaders. Do you think this will have any sort of a bearing on what's happening on ground? Because we've seen that even though the pressure has been mounting on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for quite some time now, Israel and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in fact, remains defiant.
Yeah, I don't think that the specific level of charges against the Hamas leaders will have any effect. As you noted, 3 of the 6 have already been killed, and then 1 is in hiding in Gaza and is in grave jeopardy of dying. Is a great possibility that the one hiding in Lebanon will probably be targeted by Israel at some point. Only Khaled Michel in Qatar seems to be not in fear of his life at the moment. So the possibility of being prosecuted by U.S. court is little. It's significant to you and I, but I think it's a little bit down the priority list for these people.
Colonel Roches, I also want to touch upon the point of contention, which is the Philadelphia corridor. And now the White House has said that Israel has agreed to move away from some parts of this very important corridor. Talk to us about how that will impact the ceasefire talks, because according to reports, Mossad chief David Barnea announced and rather told the negotiators about the announcement of Israeli troops withdrawing from the corridor before Netanyahu was about to give a press conference where he would clearly deny that the Israeli troops would leave the Philadelphia corridor.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion here, and I think it's unclear as to what the Israeli government's position actually is. And it's quite possible that the White House may have gotten out ahead of Netanyahu. I think that, the news reports are that Israel has said it's willing to leave the corridor as part of a ceasefire deal that would include the release of the hostages. That's interesting, but I think it's not really likely to happen in the short term, because Hamas knows when it releases the hostages, Israel will destroy them once and for all. The hostages are what's keeping Hamas's leadership alive within the Gaza Strip. So there's a little bit of confusion. Another complicating point that your report didn't bring out is that there's an issue with Egypt under the Camp David Accords that returned the Sinai to Egypt. Israel is very limited in the amount of forces it can have within 1 kilometer of the Egyptian border. So right now they're technically in violation of the Camp David Accords with Egypt. So there's a lot of issues here, and I think that there's probably a little bit of confusion. I suspect that Netanyahu will deny that this deal has been made, and I think that Barnea and the other leaders will say, yes, we can do this as part of a peace agreement, but again, or a ceasefire agreement, but again, that has floundered over and over again on the hostage release issue.
Right, Colonel Roches, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA with your insights.
Thank you.